Kate Milafalcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And I'm making a special video. I usually don't put anything up on Sundays, the Lord's Day. But I wanted to be sure to get this information out there as early as I can. Now, I don't have the link yet, but I will, and I will put it out. In the meantime, let me explain. A group of my friends and I from this YouTube community are hoping to help a family that we know who are at the moment without a home. They're without shelter. It's December. Children are involved. And they have set up a GoFundMe at our request, and we are having a fundraiser on Wednesday, this Wednesday, the 10th, December 10th, 10 a.m. Pacific. I will let you guys handle the higher math to figure out the other time zones. We will be doing free readings, one question, a couple of different ones of us will be doing them at the same time. And we will take questions from people who donate. We're trying desperately to get this family into shelter for Christmas. So I thought it would be important to have a conversation about homelessness. And people hesitate to use that word, but I like language, and I don't find the word for me is fraught with judgment. It evokes certain insecurities and emotions for me, and I imagine it does that for a lot of people. It's a difficult word. It's a difficult situation, and I'm going to continue to use the word homeless because if you don't have a roof over your head, you are homeless, without a home. So having said that, so that I don't get a lot of pushback about words, let me tell you a few facts about homelessness. Now, this was sent to me by the mother/grandmother of this family. And I can't imagine reading these statistics and this information, knowing this applies to, your own loved ones. This is difficult. So in the United States in 2025, these are the statistics that we have. There's a lag of a year or two because, bureaucracies. So as of 2025, this is what we know. They do an annual count that's called a snapshot. It's one night in January. They try to count all the people that are homeless. And as you imagine, this is not necessarily the most accurate number. If you've managed to scrounge up the money for a hotel that night, if you have a friend who's let you have a sofa for the evening, if you found someplace so out of the way they don't find you outside. So in 2023, these are the numbers that were collected. 37.9 million Americans, that's 11.5%, live below the poverty line. According to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, in 2024, the number of people counted in one night was 771,480 people. And it's a quick snapshot. It's an undercount. It's the bare minimum that we know of. So 23 out of every 10,000 people is without a home. And as I said, it's not completely accurate. It's too low because people stay with friends and family, find temporary overnight places to stay, and they don't get counted. This number of people who they did count has increased 18% in 1 year between 23 and 2024. 64% of people who are homeless sleep in places that are not meant for human habitation. Outside, in a car, in an empty building, Some go to emergency shelters, and that's a whole other issue, especially for women. Chronic homelessness has increased in the past year. It dramatically. It's defined as not being able to find a place to live for a consecutive year, or repeated episodes of not having a place to live throughout a year. A third of the homeless are chronically homeless. It's not a temporary thing. So who are these people? What are the demographics? I hope you're sitting down, because this is, I hope this scares people. I hope this motivates people. The average age, if all of the homeless are counted, not taking into consideration if they're in a family group or separate individuals, the average age of the homeless is 9 years old. If you only count single adults and you don't count the homeless, the families, the average age is 45 and increasing dramatically. Most homeless people, 2/3, are adults. Between 2023 and 2024, the number of families facing homelessness increased by 39%. 150,000 children under 18 were homeless in 2024. It had gone up by 33% for children under 18. Another demographic facing a huge increase in homelessness are the adults over 55. This is that group has one of the largest rises in percentages. So it's a misunderstanding, a misapprehension to believe that homeless people are young, single men. That is not true. They're mostly families, seniors, when you include the single seniors, and it crosses demographic boundaries of race. Women have a special set of considerations, which we'll talk about. But why are people homeless? Let's look at the causes. Well, the biggest cause is a lack of affordable housing. There just aren't places to rent. Wages are stagnant. They're not keeping up with the cost of living, inflation. Job instability. My own children all have jobs. They all work. And they work at fairly decent jobs, they're educated. But the lack of stability in the working world is kind of astounding to me. They're always changing jobs for something better, looking for a different situation, a little bit more money, a little better benefits. People don't stay in jobs with the same, I don't want to use the word loyalty, with the same consistency that they did, in the old days when I was young. And especially for lower income people, this is really a problem. And for older people and vulnerable workers, and I imagine vulnerable means people that have physical or mental disabilities, it's especially challenging because jobs are constantly being reshuffled and cut. There's an end to the protections that were available during the pandemic, and that has really negatively affected people's lives. Then there are demographic shifts that people are affected by. By that, we mean things like childcare. Ridiculous, the price of childcare. Elder care needs, medical expenses, age-related unemployment. There are many places that won't hire you if you have a certain amount of gray hair. They won't tell you that, but that's what happens. Then there are systemic inequalities baked into the system that nobody wants to admit. There are racial and ethnic groups that are disproportionately represented amongst the unhoused because of disparities in income, because of housing access. certain person we know and his father, who owned a real estate business, would write a little C in the corner of a rental application. If the person was African American, I'll leave it to your imagination what they were up to. Just outright discrimination and a lack of social support. You know, we're shamefully inadequate, woefully non-caring in our society of people who have challenges. So the increase in homelessness, what's it caused by? Well, these deep structural strains, housing supply shortages, economic inequality, insufficient social safety nets, systemic boundaries. But there's a higher number of people who are actually homeless because they don't get counted. And then there's a really high increase in the number of people who are teetering on the threat of homelessness. This is really scary. But these numbers, even though they're huge and growing, they don't really adequately reflect the broader housing instability crisis. Let's talk about women. Women are particularly vulnerable because the shelters are not always safe. There's theft and physical threats. Women living outside become targets. It's terrible. They become victims of crime at a much higher rate than men who are homeless. They often cannot access shelter because the shelters have an age limit for males. They are divided by gender, and they won't allow a woman with a male child above a certain age, and women don't want to be separated from their children. And they certainly don't want to let a vulnerable kid go be alone in the male half of the shelter. So it's really a problem. And then, of course, pregnant women, I can't even talk about that. Homelessness reflects the lack of adequate care in our culture for people with mental health issues. And it causes mental health issues, and it exacerbates those that already exist. So anxiety, depression, if you don't have them before you're homeless, you'll surely have them when you're homeless. And if you already have mental health challenges, they're exacerbated. Makes it particularly hard for women to find adequate hygiene facilities, to access health care, and to get adequate nutrition. And when you're pregnant, it's a blow to self-esteem and your sense of dignity. And when those issues with depression, anxiety, and a lack of self-esteem increase, it becomes harder and harder to even get a job. And imagine trying to present yourself to apply for a job when you have no access to a shower and clean laundry. Especially harmful for people, how they think about themselves when they're homeless, is that other people often assume that the homeless person's responsible for the situation. And they just ignore the fact that life can be really challenging, and it doesn't take a lot to end up in a very precarious position. So being homeless presents special problems for people with children. Children don't have clean clothes to wear to school. They don't have a safe place to play. They don't have access to adequate hygiene, which makes them vulnerable to bullying at school if they go. They don't necessarily have consistent school attendance. There's difficulty with transportation, and often the homeless are moving around for safe spots to stay, and that makes staying in a school difficult. Children suffer sleep deprivation, and all of this has a negative effect on their developmental growth. Then there's the emotional cost to children. There's a great deal of fear and insecurity and embarrassment around being homeless. The instability, the constant moving, the lack of predictability, children need consistency and predictability. These are very detrimental. And then, just for homeless people in general, there's particular problems they face. There are really long waits, long lists for any kind of help. You're kind of in limbo while you're waiting. Often they'll have to hide their homelessness from a job. They don't want their employer to know. They don't want family members to know. They don't want child services to know. It's this threat from the rest of society. They don't have a permanent mailing address. That makes it really hard to apply for a job. It makes it hard to receive official documents. Something people don't think about. Where do you get your mail? If you're poor, you can't afford a place to stay. You don't have a mailbox because you don't have a house, and you can't afford the cost of a mailbox at the post office. Then there's the issue of things being done by email. That's not free. You have to connect to the internet. Homelessness is especially difficult for women and children because it's often caused by particular issues. And I'm kind of dancing around some words here. DV, I think we all know what that is. Sudden loss, like your spouse dies, your partner dies or disappears, divorce. Financial issues for women are particularly challenging because of disparity in wages. Just the lack of social support, unstable work, always a problem for everybody, but women tend to have more of a challenge there. The lack of affordable housing. People sometimes don't want children in their places. The extremely high cost of childcare. So 8.9 million Americans work 2 jobs in general, and as many as 60% of the homeless work, and a large number of them work 2 full-time minimum wage jobs or a minimum wage job, and they cobble together part-time and piece work. A full-time minimum wage would require 86 hours a week at a full-time minimum wage to afford a 1-bedroom apartment. And that's not counting first and last and security deposit, et cetera, et cetera. 50% of Americans are one financial crisis or medical crisis or other kind of crisis away from homelessness. In 2024, 78% of Americans are one paycheck away from homelessness. 60% could not afford an unexpected expense of under $400. 40% could not get together 3 months of minimum income at the poverty level for an emergency, and this includes middle-class families. So this is why we're trying to help this particular family. I didn't know if I could give you a lot of details about them, and I wanted to get this out early enough that people would be aware. So there will be details forthcoming, and I have put this up in my community posts. So I hope you will consider donating to the GoFundMe, and I don't have the link yet, but like I said, I really wanted to get this out here today. We have a few more days yet to get the details worked out. I hope you will consider this. We're calling this fundraiser Home for the Holidays. And I really hope that you will do the best that you can. And I know it's hard for everybody. It's hard. It's just hard. So thank you for watching this. Thank you for listening. Sorry if I freaked everybody out with the statistics. They're pretty grim. It's hard. Looks a lot like the Depression looked, with people sleeping in their cars and sleeping in tents. And Yeah, well, thank you. And I'll be back. Slungafoil, sluncha.